okay, ask about me. And but she loved those other people in my life. So I thank you with all my heart. Thirdly, I want to thank, and I've got to be careful, but I want to thank my sister. You cannot know what it means to be in a situation to where you've done everything all your life that you wanted to do. You came and go and went and were able to play sports till you were in your 40s and early 50s, and all of a sudden all that came to a screeching halt, and my life changed. And I say this not because I'm feeling sorry for myself, but I've had a wonderful life, but I hadn't been able in the last 10 years to do what I wanted to do as far as moving around. I couldn't come down here to be with her like I would, anywhere close to like I would like to be. Had it not been for Kathy, I would have gone nuts. I would have, Kathy. And talking to her, knowing the decision she made, trusting her, I found something that I never thought would happen, but I was not as close to my sister as I would have liked to have been growing up. And in the last number of years, whether she feels this way or not, I don't care. I have begun to love and admire and cherish her more than ever before, and her opinions and her decisions. And so, Kathy, thank you so much, honey. Now, I've rambled, and I told the pastor that I was going to probably talk too long, and he said, that's okay, so I'm taking advantage of it. I won't have another advantage like this again. Mom was not the most beautiful woman that ever lived, but she might have been the second most beautiful. At least that's the way I looked at her. I'm sure she had her faults, but I couldn't find a whole lot of them, not nearly as many as I had myself. And I've looked at her over the years, and I have been amazed at how she has been able to greet people and make people feel as if they were so special. And that's such a gift. It's such a treasure to have. And I was the recipient of that. Every year for 15 or 16, 17 years, we would all come down to Bay Point, 16 of us guys, and we were all golfers, and we would stay at the condo or we would stay with Mom and Clyde. And she would invariably have us over to feed us a couple of times during the 4 or 5 days that we were here. These friends of mine began to look upon her as another mother. And it was so neat for me to see that friendship and that love develop over all these years, to the point to where they ended up buying her a plaque. And you remember that, Kathy? And I forget what it said now, but it was something about to the Mom of the Year or whatever. And they presented it to her, and you know it touched her. But these guys really and truly believed that they had a second mom. And I was so glad to share. And I'm so glad that we let her come to Panama City, which is a joke because she was coming anyways. I'm so glad that we let her come to Panama City where y'all can enjoy her too. I'll finish by saying that I can't think of any one sentence to describe her other than to say that she was the most lady that I had ever known. And I was so lucky that she was my mom. Thank you.
May I introduce to you Miss Leanne Todd.
Hello, how's everybody doing today? My name is Leanne Todd, and I was Rosamond King's granddaughter, and she was my best friend, and she was my hero. She set the bar of how I want to live my life, and she taught me so many things. I would go to her during every success, every failure, and she would hold my hand and she would laugh at me or laugh with me. And you know, sometimes I would go to her and say such silly things like, well, so-and-so's jealous of me, and you know, da-da-da-da-da, and she would flip the coin and say, well, you could always be poor and ugly. So, so that's the alternative, Leanne, so quit whining. But, I mean, she just had the best sense of humor. She was so funny. She was so funny, and then I would go to her with heartbreak over work or family or a lost love, and she knew when to just hold me. She knew when to hold my hand. She knew when to give me advice, and she always gave me advice. I trusted her advice because of who she was. Her opinions mattered to me, and by the way she lived her life, it was evident that she had succeeded in life, you know, and that her solutions worked. And I never got this, and sometimes I still don't. Every time I would go to her with a broken heart, and some of them were so silly, she would say, you know, I'd cry on her shoulder forever, and she would comfort me as long as I needed, and then she would say, are you mad yet? And I never understood that. And then I would call back 2 weeks later, a week later, and I would say, I'm still sad. She was like, well, I just want to know if you're mad yet. And then finally, I've started to get that because if it's not the right person, I think it's maybe a little bit easier to get over if you have a little bit of anger towards the situation. But I think it'll take me many years to really learn that because she was so wise. She was just the most amazing woman I've ever met. I mean, she was my hero. She was my best friend. And in a way, she was my idol. You know, she set the bar of how I want to live. She had these two amazing loves in her life. You know, my grandfather that I never had the pleasure of meeting, but have heard stories about. And then Papa, the grandfather that I knew. And I would go over there. I had the pleasure of being with them many summers in high school. I would come to Panama City, and then when I moved to Panama City after college, I would spend, I don't know, 4 or 5 days a week over with my grandmother and grandfather, and he would watch golf, and we would look through fashion magazines, and she would cook dinner for the family, and you know, I would help her. I wish I'd learned some of those recipes. But, I mean, it was my comfort zone. Her and my mom's have always been my comfort zone. And, you know, it just was the safest place I knew. She accepted me, like Uncle Larry was saying. She accepted me for exactly who I was. She didn't want me to be something I wasn't. She loved me unconditionally, more unconditionally than I've ever felt besides my immediate family, you know, and she believed in me. She would be there for me through my successes in life and cheer for me. And she would be there through failures and hug me and let me just cry on her shoulder and let me know that that wasn't my fate, that something else bigger was coming. And I just want to read a poem that reminds me of how I feel about my grandmother very much. And the poem is by E. Cummings, and it starts, I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I'm never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful, you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that keeps the stars apart. I carry your heart, and I carry it in my heart. My grandmother's spirit has always been with me. We have been two peas of a pod for a very long time, and our love was so special, and I know all of you that knew her knew how special that love was. She was a gift to me and all that knew her, and she had a light inside her that was so bright. When she walked in the room, everyone noticed. And it wasn't just because she was the most beautiful girl ever, or the funniest girl ever, or the kindest girl ever, or cared about her community. She just had this presence that just was seen and known because she loved people. So I feel extremely blessed to have had her as my grandmother, and now hopefully her as a guardian angel watching over me. And she was my heart, is my heart, and will always be my heart. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
May I introduce Mr. Michael Hemphill?
I do want to take a moment to thank all of you for being here today. I know that a midweek ceremony like this can be logistically challenging to attend, and we very much appreciate you taking the time and setting aside your responsibilities to be here. I had the very good fortune of being Rosamond King's grandson. Her only grandson, as my sisters never hesitated to point out, when a certain halo would descend on my head when we would step foot in her house. With Rois, as we called her, I supposedly came up with this title, and in hindsight, I can't help but wonder if she perhaps nurtured that along, because can any of you actually imagine Rosamond King being called Granny? Not I. With Rois and Clyde at her side, life always seemed to be a party. From her, we not only learned to play cards, we learned to love cards. Or as she would tell us that her Baptist preacher father used to say, 52 tickets to hell. With Rois, we learned to admire dancing, though in my case with little personal success. We learned to love travel. At age 9, she and Clyde took me on my very first plane trip, and I still remember the brown three-piece suit that was bought for me to wear on the plane. In the 70s, you needed that vest, apparently. And wore it on the plane from Birmingham to New Orleans, where over the next 3 days, I rode a paddle boat down the Mississippi, toured the French Quarter, ate beignets at Café du Monde, ate shrimp Creole for the first